This video is brought to you by viewers like you. Thanks for letting me do this for so long. Do you know what I hate more than anything in the entire world? Cows. You know, they taste nice, but they eat a lot of food and make a lot of poo, so frankly, we could probably do without them. Unfortunately, I'm not gonna make a video about, cows in video games, so I'll have to fall back on my second most hated thing in the entire world, invisible walls at the edge of video games, which conveniently lends itself a bit more naturally to one of these videos. Listen, I understand how video games are made, and I fully accept that only some of them can stretch on forever into the void, but few things bring me screaming back to reality than finding the edge of a game's map and realizing that it's just an invisible wall. The developers didn't care about the boundaries, they just didn't want me to go past where they'd finished. So screw that noise, we're going to look at 5 games that felt particularly extra enough to put something on the boundary to organically keep you within the confines of the game instead of a stupid invisible wall. Practical problems often require creative solutions. So for there to be a limit to how big a game world can be, you have to have some kind of landscape that can go on forever. You can impose boundaries by literally making it impossible to go on forever, like how Skyrim has mountains and Breath of the Wild has bottomless canyons, but if you don't fancy any of that, you're gonna have to crack open some optical illusions. A lot of games go for a ton of water and put some kind of blockade in place before you reach the actual map limit, but to start with, I want to talk about Serious Sam 3, which is a game that doesn't have a lot of water on hand to spread around the environment, but it sure does have a lot of sand, which functionally is basically water that you can walk on. So you can have it stretch out in all directions around you as a method of showing just how huge the area is, but you can stop once you've got the scale you desire. And then stick a giant sand whale in there for any particularly ambitious players. Yeah, so Serious Sam 3 takes an innovative approach to finding alternatives to invisible walls by going down the Dune route of having these absolutely humongous sandy boys hiding on the border, and you better believe that they haven't been fed recently. What I love the most about these sand whales is that it never turns into an automatic cutscene. The boundaries in a lot of areas is quite strict, and so you need that element of control to potentially retreat away from the barrier and not be eaten by the big sandworms. They can't be damaged or killed, which is something you may work out quickly, so you stop seeing them as an enemy and start accurately seeing them as something put in the game with the sole purpose of keeping you boxed into the game world. Plus, their incredible size works well with Serious Sam as a consistency thing, since most of the strongest creatures and indeed most of the best boss fights are against very large monsters. So you can have a functionally invisible wall and also more terrifying monsters. It's a win-win for everyone. Hey guys, real quick, my channel has been approved for YouTube memberships now, so if you fancy supporting my channel more directly, you can become a member for as little as £1 a month and gain access to some nifty perks, as well as being featured on my channel page. Hit the join button below this video if that sounds cool to you. Thank you, and let's get back to the video. You know who I have a newfound respect for? Lakitu in Mario Kart, because if you want to stretch the addition of a game boundary out to its natural conclusion, whereupon it doesn't actually make any sense anymore, the little cloud turtle who found new employment away from Bowser's unionless vocations is now doing some very fine work making sure you don't get too far off track. Kinda literally. It makes me wonder how other racing games prevent you from leaving the circuit, and while most of them time you out or quickly warp you back to where you should be, Splashdown, this wave race looking alternative where you zip around on jet skis, has a particularly interesting method of keeping you in line. In normal races, there's nothing too exciting going on, but there's a little side mode called Free Roam, where there's no time limit for you to respawn back at the track, and so you can go quite far out into all of this water. I sure hope there's nothing crazy in the water around here. I do love semi-serious racing games having a mad 5 minutes and putting in a fucking giant sea creature on the map boundary. There's no indication that Splashdown would ever pull something like this, but wouldn't you just know it? This big tentacle will pop out of the water and scoop you up. Now, honestly, if this was it, I'd still love everything about this and how bonkers it is, but Splashdown went above and beyond what you could possibly expect from a racing game because this squid monster has got a sick throwing arm. You get yeeted all the way back to the racetrack and probably a bit further than that, with special bonus points for how your racer skims off the surface of the water like a flat stone, and also the sound it makes as you whistle through the air. This is just absolutely superb, and clearly something that developers enjoy doing, because Rainbow Studios have a bit of a history with launching you back to the circuit, since Motocross Madness 2 has a similarly abrupt reset, which I definitely considered for this video, but I don't see a giant squid. That's very important in a video like this. Hey, let me tell you what franchise hates invisible walls almost as much as me. Far Cry games have taken a bit of a tumble off a cliff of quality over the last decade or so, but wherever possible, they've kept an open mind when it comes to what happens when you stray a little too close to the edge of playable space. Far Cry 2 will give you a dose of super malaria so you die pretty much instantaneously. Far Cry New Dawn has the radiation zone, which prevents you from going too far because your body soaks up a little too much radioactive material. And Far Cry 6, well, Far Cry 6 was singing from a completely different hymn sheet. I don't love this game. The good stuff feels like it's been done before, and the bad stuff is plentiful and invasive, and I fucking hate it. But I will praise Far Cry 6 for continuing a now lengthy tradition of creative secret endings. These two things are related, don't you worry, but whereas in previous games you had to be a really passive police officer, or a lover of the fine, subtle flavors of crab rangoon, Far Cry 6's secret ending can only be accessed if you're feeling a little too adventurous. Most Far Cry games these days take place on some fictional island surrounded by water, and sure enough, Far Cry 6 takes place in Yara, a fictional Caribbean island, and your goal is to destabilize the dictatorship and support the resistance, which is basically in line with most of the previous Far Cry games. The secret endings have come about from refusing to take part in the game, and Far Cry 6 lets you take a more literal approach by letting you sail a boat out beyond the beaches of Yara, and as soon as you reach the confines of the game world, it triggers a cutscene when the protagonist Danny decides that she doesn't need to fight for Yara after all. It could end here with a fade to black and I wouldn't be upset, but Far Cry 6 decides to go even further, and now we've got Danny relaxing on a beach without a care in the world as a radio report mentions that the resistance was defeated and that the global pandemic rumbles on. I mean, there's your options. You can either go kill hundreds of people in a violent coup, or you can chill the fuck out on a beach and worry a little less. Hey, this way I don't have to play through Far Cry 6 and see how the story pans out. It isn't worth it. Are you ready for this video to delve into the existentialism of a world having a border to it? I mean, it depends on who you ask and how much money they've invested in JPEGs on the blockchain, but it kinda reminds me of fucking stupid flat earth theorists who I think say that the dinner plate shaped earth is surrounded on all sides by a big wall of ice? Mate, could you imagine? The planet heating up would be an even bigger problem than it already is. We'd all be spilling out over the sides. Video games that come with a lot of water don't shell out for a big ass ice wall, and that's because Subnautica has an infinitely more terrifying solution that is able to tie into the deep lore, as well as make you shit yourself in fear on a regular basis. Subnautica has lots of different areas for you to explore and even more horrifying water beasties for you to keep half an eye out for at all times, but there is a limit to how widespread the ecosystem goes. I mean, you can go to some incredibly remote areas and still find something to eat or something that fancies a bite out of you, and it's this helpful nugget of context that makes the crater edge so deeply chilling. It's described in-game as an ecological dead zone, which sadly isn't true, but it's where all the world design in Subnautica quite literally falls away from under your feet. The game gives you a few warnings that this isn't somewhere you want to be going, although those are more there for confirmation that you are where you think you are, since you tend to realize what's happening when you stop seeing anything other than the inky blue sea, stretching out endlessly in front of you and below you. Venture out even further, you fucking madman, and Subnautica will give you some friends to play with. Ghost leviathans will swarm around you until they've killed you, at which point you'll respawn back inside the escape pod you started the game in, with a fresh lesson of not swimming out too far ringing through your ears. Considering that this is likely a mistake that you make early on in Subnautica, it's a ruthless, unforgiving method of teaching a player the limits of what they can explore. You know, it could have been an invisible wall, but those aren't scary. Any excuse, eh? If there's one thing you can take away from Subnautica, it can be that water generally makes an easy, natural boundary in a game. You can easily set up the illusion of water going on forever, and then you just need to find a way of stopping the player in a way that doesn't feel like a fourth wall break. The difference between something like Subnautica and Sea of Thieves is that the latter decided against a giant sea monster that could attack you when you explore a little too far, which is interesting since there is absolutely no shortage of aquatic beasties in Sea of Thieves that could have been deployed on the borders. Instead, this game angled itself towards more of a spectacle. Why would you waste your time on Leviathans when you can just turn the sea very red indeed? You know how Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom both have the blood moon that makes the night sky all red and very angry? This is the same kind of vibe that I get with Sea of Thieves' Blood Sea, except whereas the blood moon is a natural part of how the Zelda games respawn their enemies, the Blood Sea is something that you'll only ever stumble across when you explore the outer reaches of the world. They could have easily done something like in Subnautica and Serious Sam 3 and had something that physically stops you, but the Blood Sea does something far more interesting. It causes constant damage to your boat, and even though you can stave it off for a little while with enough coordinated teammates, eventually it's always too much. It's maybe not quite as dramatic as what would happen if, I don't know, the Kraken took you under if you sailed far enough out, but the visuals are honestly stunning for something that will not necessarily happen to everyone. It's not a sudden process either. The sea will gradually turn this deep crimson as you slowly realise that no one's been looking at the map for a while and now you're basically screwed. You know, I don't think I need to look at the map to work out that I'm somewhere that I shouldn't be. Something gives the game away, I'm sure. I'll work it out. And that's all the creative boundaries for today. Do you agree, or is there something else that should have been at number 1? Let me know in a comment down below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and hit subscribe for more videos, and hit that bell for notifications of every new upload. If you need something else to watch right now, I ranked Street Fighter games last week, and I also want to thank my top supporters on Patreon, including Scott Riker, The Green Scorpion, and Sarah Malion. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.